Prior to President Trump's announcement that he is pausing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico until April 2nd, the trade war between the United States and Canada that lasted 2 days sparked tremendous anxiety on Canadians. In response to Donald Trump's tariffs, Canada appeared united, at least politically, in how we should respond.
Canadians are reasonable and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake.
But I'm here with a message of hope. We will overcome this attack on our economy, and I have a plan to do it. First, we must retaliate, targeting American goods in the following order. A, goods that we can make ourselves. B, goods we don't need. And C, goods we can get from elsewhere.
This is not something that we wanted. It is unwarranted. It is wrong. It's illegal. And we are going to fight back. And Canadians are already showing that defiance. They're standing up for one another. They're showing that they want to buy Canadian. They're boycotting American.
Prime Minister Trudeau enacted counter tariffs, and provincial governments added on their own restrictions, including pulling American alcohol out of retail outlets. But despite the political support for a tariff response, economists have been raising their voices, highlighting that no one wins in a trade war. One of those economists is Dr. Vincent Geloso from George Mason University, and he joins us now for more on the debate. Thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, the Prime Minister has said that Canada will win this trade war, but we've had an economist on the program before who have said that Canada's counter tariffs will be paid for by Canadians, but that the amount really depends on the elasticity of the product. Where will Canadians be hit the hardest as a result of Trudeau's tariff response?
So it's hard to know exactly where we will be hit, but the reality is tariffs are basically a form of economic poison, and counter tariffs is just doubling down on the dosage. So there is no reason we should expect anything else than, in real terms, that our incomes will fall, so that we will have fewer dollars in our wallets, and these dollars will not go as far. So there's no way around it. But when you look at the effect of the tariffs and you try to break it down by American tariffs and the effect of the Canadian counter tariffs, the reality is they're pretty much the same size. So the counter reply hurts Canadians as much as the American response. So it's a horrible policy that's been put on the table. The only thing we should do now is actually go the opposite route. If protectionism is poison, then free trade is the antidote, and that means we need to go and liberalize our own economy and open up to foreign investments and open up our goods to open up our markets to foreign goods so that Canadians get the cheapest prices possible and they can spend more, they can save more, and then you get more economic activity.
With Trudeau claiming that Canada is going to win a trade war if it happens and really pushing that Team Canada approach, would you say that Trudeau is sugarcoating the reality of what a trade war could really look like for the country?
Yes, there's a lot of sugarcoating because trade war is essentially a pissing contest between rulers of different countries, and the people who get dosed are basically the consumers. The analogy of winning a trade war is no one is proud to win a pissing contest. I'm sorry to use this kind of imagery to convey the point, but there is no better analogy to convey this idea. Protectionism hurts people. It hurts wallets. It reduces living standards, and the result is a less prosperous nation. In fact, it we will lose so much from engaging in this trade war by retaliating that we're in a situation where what would likely happen is that by becoming poorer as a result of that, poorer than we otherwise would be, we will not be as able in the future to exercise our sovereignty. So it's important to understand sovereignty is something that richer nation can more easily assert. And by making ourselves poor, we're making ourselves more vulnerable in the future. By going the exact opposite route, free trade, open markets, opening up investments, and that means same, for example, telecoms, airline markets, removing whatever non-tariff barriers we have. We reduce prices for Canadian consumers. These consumers have more to spend in other industries. They have more to put in savings accounts, and these savings accounts become things that fund investment, and they make the Canadian economy grow in productivity. And that productivity becomes so high that we can actually say to the American president, well, we're so productive that you got to hurt yourself so much more before we take you seriously. Our prosperity is our only way to immunize ourselves against the caprice, as we would say in French, of the American president.
Now, I want to stay on a topic that you just mentioned that you've also argued prior that the only answer here is a full free trade. How is that different from the USMCA?
So it means that the USMCA and any other type of trade agreement is one about reciprocity, where we're liberalizing in the hope that the other nation does it. And that, if you look at the economics literature, is the best thing that we can get. But if the best thing is no longer on the table because the president decided that he doesn't want to do this, the second best thing is still free trade, but we do it on our own. The benefits will not be as large as multilateral free trade, but they're still positive and larger than what we're doing now. So we still have to do the thing Trump, no Trump, open markets, open trade, open capital market, greater competition is still the correct answer. It's not because it's less enticing than it was before that we have to stop doing it. Again, it goes back to the protectionism is poison. It's not because the other guy has decided to make himself sick that we have to decide, you know what, let's make ourselves sick even more than otherwise would be the case. It's a very stupid policy to engage in protectionism.
And is there any country that has moved to full free trade? And do we know what that outcome was?
So we have examples in history of countries that have gone full free trade. We have Britain in the 19th century, but we also have recently, mid 20th century, we have Singapore, Hong Kong, big success stories of the 20th century. We also have countries now that are going in that direction. Switzerland, for example, last year removed all its tariff on industrial products, regardless of country of origin. So there are countries that go in that direction. And actually, if you look at the history of liberalization, most liberalizations are done without seeking what the other country would do the same thing at the same time. Most liberalization happen unilaterally. So there's a big case to be made that this is the way to go.
Now, with Trump's tariffs paused until April 2nd for both Canada and Mexico, will Canadians getting a 2 day glimpse of what a trade war could really look like change the preparation for when it actually happens, most likely on April 2nd?
So I'm hoping for something different here. What I would be hoping is that people remember a choice that we have already made as Canadians. So in 1900, Argentina and Canada were basically considered to be the potential champions of the 20th century, and they were of equal wealth. And the difference between the two of them is that one of them chose protectionism, Argentina, and the other one chose a commitment to free market policy or market friendly policies, and that was Canada. The difference 100 years later is entirely visible. Argentina is a poor country. Canada is a wealthy country. We have the same choice now. And the reality is, when we follow that, there is something that is left in people's imagination. And people remember, they get some form of cultural knowledge of the importance of free trade. And I'm hoping right now that people will see what protectionism does to living standards, to how much their future seems bleaker in the world of jingoism and mercantilism and trade barriers, and that they will forever remember this as yes, free trade is superior to protectionism. And our prime minister and the premiers of the provinces who engage in the same type of retaliatory measures were only making things worse, and that this will reinforce what is essentially Canada's long-standing ethos of free trade. So it's worth pointing out Canada still does some protectionism, but Canada is a long story of being one of the most pro free trade countries in the world.
Now, I want to shift to non tariff measures. Ontario decided to pull American alcohol from the LCBO, and a lot of other premiers followed suit. Is that maybe a smarter way to fight back that doesn't impose a tariff tax on Canadians?
You know, I find it sarcastic that, or that the premier of Ontario, and it's sarcasm in spite of his wit, because what's happening is, remember, the LCBO is a monopoly. So the monopoly, which reduces competition, is now sad that there is competition. So it decides that it's going to remove even more competition. It's just circling down the same drain. The reality is we need to have more competition in Canada in this weird LCBO example, but same thing in my home province of Quebec with the SAQ. They're doing exactly the same thing. And in both cases, these are government monopolies. And it kind of highlights what I keep trying to make as a point is what we need as a country is not to fiddle within the system of protectionism or anything that removes competition indirectly or directly. We need to go in the opposite direction, which is introduce competition. So if Premier Ford was a serious person in the history of the world, he would go along the lines of saying, you know what we should do? We should let Canadians pick what they want to consume, Canadian or non-Canadian markets. And you know what? The LCBO shouldn't exist.
Thank you so much for the time today.
Cheers.